Okay, so my name is Paul Cale. I live in Australia. I predominantly work in Brisbane, in Queensland. I also spend a lot of time in Sydney, New South Wales, and the other capitals, but mostly Sydney and Brisbane. Right now, I'm the founder of the Australian Army Combatives program. It's used in the entire Australian Army for soldiers and officers, and has levels of training. It's based around the weapon systems of the modern army and the armor of the modern army, but it's informed by my martial arts background and heritage. And also it's informed by my experience on the battlefield. So I deployed into Afghanistan. I was in Afghanistan 2007, 2008, 2009, and 2010. I'm a former member of the 2nd Commando Regiment, part of Australian Special Forces. I also deployed to Iraq. So that's sort of, I guess, where the combatives program sort of is taken from. It's also used in the New Zealand Army now. So the New Zealand Army is taken on board. So it's an ANZAC capability, Australian New Zealand Army combatives program. I started out in 1979 with Taekwondo. And then as time went on, back then martial arts was just club martial arts, so twice a week. So I wanted to do nothing but martial arts. So I found that if I went to another club, I could train on the alternate nights to the one that I was at. But that was frowned upon back then. You know, you're meant to stay with a particular club. So what I did is I would do a different martial art, a grappling martial art if I was doing a striking martial art. So I took up judo in 1985. I got my first black belt in 1983, which was Taekwondo. And I took up judo. I took up Aikido, originally with the Aikikai in 1986, somewhere like this. And then later on, I was introduced, once I joined the Army, I was posted to Townsville and I met Watanabe sensei, who had come to Australia and was sponsored by a solicitor who wanted to learn Yoshinkan Aikido. And that was the first time I heard about Yoshinkan Aikido. So I started Yoshinkan Aikido in 1988, I think it was, 88 or late 87. And I first went to Japan to train at the Yoshinkan in 1991. So that was my experience with Yoshinkan. I have a black belt in Yoshinkan Aikido, and country sensei Gozo Shioda named my dojo Renshinkan. I also came back to Australia and I wanted to understand about different styles of Aikido. Pre-war Aikido, I had experienced Aikikai, but I wanted to experience pre-war Aikido. So I took up Tamiki Aikido, have a black belt in Tamiki Aikido, and competed often in Australia. And then later on, I took up Gokushinru, which is a Yoseikan school that has carried on after the Yoseikan sort of went down the Yoseikan Budo model in France. In Japan, it's carried on as Gokushinru under Washishu sensei, and I have a Yondan with them. A lot of sacrifice throws and so on linked to the Aikido. So they're the three styles of Aikido that I hold black belt in. I also have a black belt in Kudo Daidojuku and trained under the late Azuma Takashi, Jukucho, founder of Kudo. And I was the Australian branch chief, Australian Shibucho. I also have a 7th degree in Kyokushin Budokaikan under Kaicho John Blooming, the late Kaicho John Blooming. I have a Kodokan black belt in Kodokan Judo. I trained with Arthur Mooreshead in Australia, who was an Englishman, 8th Dan. back in the day. I also have a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, first degree, under Jean-Jacques Machado. And now I'm with Yuki Nakai in Japan. And Dan Higgins, he's representative in Australia, who I train with regularly. That should equal something like 8. And if it doesn't, I've missed something. But anyway, that should be about it. So I haven't been chasing black belts as such. I just chased training. And because club training was twice a week, I ended up always doing 2 things at the same time, which I was fortunate. And then as time went on, I just wanted to understand the gaps in my martial art training, which set me up very well for my time in the military. And then because of my experience, I started to change. I got involved in the close quarter fighting and the unarmed combat. And because I was a special forces operator, I knew how to fight with weapons. Excuse me. And I knew how to link the capabilities together. And then after my own experience on the battlefield fighting hand to hand, it gave me great insight into shortfalls and what needed to be achieved in a short amount of time, and the best way to gain advantage through weapons and numbers. And that's pretty much it. So now full time, I work as a contractor, and we contract capability back to the Army in a range of different areas, but mostly around close combat. But we also do, preparation for deployment training, driver training, and we do close personal protection training, things like that. So my martial arts is really about enjoying myself and not having to compromise. We have a martial art organization now called GSEN Budo International. We just sort of started that as a collective of like-minded individuals, and it's rapidly growing around Australia, and we have about 20 countries involved in it now, just from people wanting to be involved around the world. So that's it in a nutshell. It's a good insight by you. So for me, martial arts, Budo now is on the other side of the coin. So I think there's a lot of people that train Budo to develop skills and to develop a capability. For me, I've hit the apex of, I guess, what I expect to experience in my life, but it has changed my life and my thinking. So I very much think like like a warrior. I feel like I always need to be armed. For me, it's just natural to think like a warrior. Because I'm uncomfortable if I'm not aware of my surroundings and things like this. So it becomes a natural thing. But Budo for me is actually a calming influence. So it's the other way for me. It's not about preparing. It's about decompression. It's about the calming elements. And it gave me an interesting insight into Budo in Japan after World War II. I mean, if you look at it, it stopped being about the military imperial mindset and so forth and preparing for war, and it changed into peace and so forth. I understand why Japanese masters who experienced World War II, and for Japan, it didn't end well for them, that their emphasis was very different. And now it's changing again, because people see, well, hang on, martial arts has to be able to work and has to be able to be effective. This becomes an important thing. So you can see it's almost, people need to pass through stages. And I believe you should do a martial art that's effective, and you don't need to question it. And, but in the end, it should be something that can be sustained past the competitive or fighting or anything else that's linked to it. So it becomes something that keeps you calm and keeps your spirit sustained in later life. Well, I think a warrior is somebody who partakes or is willing to partake in war. So, this is how I think. And when you look at Budo, I think this is where people are drawn to Budo, is exposing themselves to a culture that's different to the modern culture. It's an ancient culture where things were very different and the threats in the world were very different. Now in Japan's a very safe place. But there are many places around the world that aren't safe. And I think people are drawn to understanding warrior mindset. It's very hard to become a warrior if you're not exposed to the threats. But I think this is where the language that you hear in combat sports is related. I mean, it's an interesting thing. It's I think combat sports to me are just Shiai is just a form of randori. It's just a competitive randori, and it still has rules and structure to it. But it's important because young people, if they don't have a chance to test themselves, if you don't have a chance to develop confidence, then what happens is you start questioning everything that you do. There's only, a lot of times, if you think about it, the martial arts is led by people who have led extraordinary lives, and we lean on those stories. And I think it's important for Budoka to all strive to live their own extraordinary life. Budo should not be about living the life of somebody else. It should be empowering to live your own life, however that is, whether it's you're fighting in the courtroom, you're fighting, whatever it is. Life is a battle to survive. And if it's not, you're living in the first world. And most people who are not wealthy don't have the luxury of choosing whether they fight for survival. I think Budo reminds us of our mortality and how quickly things can turn against us. So at least, for me, I think at least I like there to be randori. I like there to be kumite, just so that there's a free play and a testing. And also people realize how resilient the human body is. Like, there can be moments where someone has a lucky shot and so forth, but, the human body is very resilient. And if we let the flesh of the body dictate what we're capable of, we'll never do much at all. And it's really going past what you think you can do and ignoring the pain of the body and excelling that changes the person you are. So to me, this is Budo. And this is why, I use the term Jisen. I guess it's not really a common thing to do. It's not something that is, you do see it in Kyokushin like Jisen Kumite, but it's not a term that's a common term in Budo. It doesn't make sense to the Japanese to use that term in Budo. But for me, it's I live the martial way. I don't live Bushido. Bushido is a code, from as far as I'm concerned, a Japanese code that I don't really link too much with. Budo is more of just a sense, a spirit, belonging and following a way of life. But Jisen is to keep it real, to make it about real fighting, because I believe that the spirit and the things we can learn from that are just as important. It's not, no one has the people who fight don't have a stake and own the right to what combat is. Those who fight sport, and those who don't fight sport don't own the rights to what spiritual empowerment and Budo is. No one owns any of the space. It's a matter of you stepping through these stages. And so I think for me, Budo is always changing, and I can't compete like a young person, but I was just training just before, but I'll still wrestle young people. I'll still train and pass on experience. I'll still kick and punch, but I have to adapt. And now my body's damaged and so forth. And then I realized, now I start to understand why there's such a variety of techniques, because there are things that I used to do that I can't. I have to adapt my body. But my Budo has taught me other ways of doing things. And I used to think it was so I could teach other people to do things that suit their style and their thinking. But now I've learned also, as you're damaged, you may need to adapt. And on the battlefield, you may be damaged during your combat and you have to adapt. There's, you may have one arm now, not two, and so on. So it's a very interesting path to follow. And I'm always learning. And the more I travel it, the more writings from old Budo masters, are interesting again, but they mean something different. So I loved a lot of things that people wrote when I was reading about Budo, but I didn't really understand it. It just sounded romantic. But now I actually think, geez, whether I understand their take on it, I may not, but I understand it as it works for me. And also my best friendships, Budo, my strongest friendships that I have, more so than soldiers that I fought with, from Budoka, who share thinking as I do. And so, close friends that I have, I would say Darren Jordan from Kyokushin is an example, but so is Joe Tambu from Aikido. I consider both to be very close friends. And there's other friends in there as well in Aikido and Kyokushin, but these two people, I share something and an experience that we've both shared over many decades. And then there's, Dan Higgins, who, I met it's an interesting thing. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but he follows Yuki Nakai. So it's a Japanese Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's sort of different again, it's a very interesting thing. So it's an interesting path. I mean, I did martial arts all my life, and I mostly only stopped a couple of times. And one time was to go through recruit training with the Army. So I stopped for about 3 months. But one of the significant times I stopped was after that I fought on the battlefield and ended up in a hand-to-hand combat. And I realized I felt that all my martial art training was waste for nothing. So I had a very negative opinion of martial arts for maybe about 6 months. And I just thought everything was just garbage. And my experience made me question everything, question my life. Then one day I had someone ask me if I would do a seminar, and I did. And I taught some judo. And I was so happy doing it. Like, it was the enjoyment of being around people and helping people and showing them judo at the time. But it also made me start to think that my martial arts didn't fail me. They probably saved my life. But what they did for me is exactly what I asked for. So I think I expected a submission to be the end of the fight. But the enemy just kept fighting, even if I broke their arm. So the submission wasn't the end, but my training, it was. So my training ended with the submission, which is, you'll hear people say it's the ultimate and so forth. No, it's not. It's just breaking a limb. So this is where I realized that It didn't let me down. It did exactly, I fought as I trained. And then I had to think. And when you're panicking or when you're fighting for your life, you don't want to think too much. You just want to be doing and be winning the fight. But then when you're in shock and you start thinking, a lot of things go through your mind. And then this is what can bring on the panic. And if there's panic and your heart rate goes up and your breathing becomes rapid, your ability to think is diminished. So it's the last thing you want. And so that's why I realized that you need to train for the end state. You need to train where you've controlled the person after you've broken a limb, or you need to train after you strangled the person, and so on. So it's the lock, or if someone submits to you on the battlefield and you keep the lock on, it doesn't end. How do you control them after this? So this is something I spend a lot of time on now. And it's an interesting thing because I saw some jiu-jitsu techniques that were a date, or I think 1590, somewhere like this. So 16th century Japan. And the Japanese instructors were saying to me, we have these pictures, we have these techniques, the names and pictures, but we don't have context, and we don't understand context for these techniques. And that's where they said, because you've been on the battlefield, this is the Gokushinmaru people, you've been on the battlefield, can you please investigate? And it's been a very interesting journey, because as soon as I thought to myself, maybe I'm arresting somebody after I've broken a limb and I'm keeping control so that we can capture them, all of a sudden the techniques start to make sense. Excuse me. So that's where, it's again, you never stop learning. This became exciting for me because you're trying to bring alive. It's like restoring a vehicle, like you got something here that is being preserved. So there's two things I can do. I can preserve something that's old, or I can restore it to its former glory, but it'll be restored with a modern take, maybe a modern engine if it's a car, and paint work and so forth. But the body is predominantly the same. That's the bit that excites me, because in this case, what is there to preserve? There's a position on the ground and a name. So what's happening with the preservation of these techniques is there's no context. It's just, here's the different formats of this is what it looks like. My goal is to restore and to bring some form of glory and to bring these techniques alive with the experience of the battlefield, and to try and make sense of them. And whether I'm exactly right or not doesn't matter, because it looks the same, but at least there's life and the thing is living again. So it's things like that are really interesting and exciting for me now.
Thank you, Sensei. Before I forget, and I want to ask you about that background you have there. What is exactly behind you?
I'm in my office, and behind me is a MP5, a 9mm rifle, if you like, and a USP, H&K USP pistol. So these are two weapons that we use for the Tactical Assault Group, which is for counter-terrorism in Australia. So we use different weapons, but when I was doing this training, these were the two predominant weapons that we use: the H&K MP5 and variants of it, and also the H&K USP 9mm pistol with a torch on it.
The insignias are from
2nd Commando Regiment, 2nd Commando Regiment, and also Tag East, which is this one there, Tag East. Look at that. That's technique happening right there. Yeah, and this one here is the 2nd Commando Regiment. Oh, I don't think you need to be obsessed with it at all. I just think that if what you're doing is not effective in a particular field, so if it's not really all that effective in self-defense, then as long as you're happy with that, and as long as you don't portray what you're doing as anything else, I don't think it matters. I mean, tennis is probably more effective. Baseball is definitely more effective self-defense than many martial arts, because if I hit you in the head with a baseball bat or throw a baseball at you, then belt you in the head with a baseball bat, you know, it's it's just everything's sport, you know. So it's like it's up to, it's more about the person. So when you think like that, I just said to you that baseball's an effective martial art. People will be thinking, what is he talking about? Until I come at you and throw a baseball at you and you protect yourself and I hit you in the head with a baseball bat. Yeah. So you know, that's a technique that people would think has nothing to do with martial arts or self-defense. And then people who understand violence or exposed to violence, you realize that anything can be effective if it's trained to be effective. And many things come from a background that was effective, but its current context, there's no interest in it being effective. So Aikido is the classic. So, you know, but I'll tell you, I was fortunate enough to visit Daitoru when I was in Japan with Kondo sensei, and he took great pleasure in showing me what locks feel like without the cushions that are taught in kata. And I can tell you that it was effective and it hurt me. And to this day, it was 1991, I remember that dojo and I remember the pain I was going through at the time. But it's, you know, and then if I look at sport Aikido, I mean, particular throws, people want you to fall. And if you fall, they win. So you're learning counters to techniques. You don't need to learn counters to techniques if they're not effective. But there's plenty of Aikido techniques that are effective if they're done in an effective manner. And the techniques are adapted so that you know, it does lock you up. And I use these techniques in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu all the time. And I'm always wrist locking people. I'm always doing things that are illegal in judo these days that are still legal in jiu-jitsu. So again, it just comes down to how you apply it. I got punched in the throat, so I have a cough going on at the moment, which has nothing to do with COVID, just to do with getting punched in the throat. But that's all right. I will survive. But yes, but I have maybe the application, you know, like I'm finding now, like Aikido, if the arm, you know, the arm's out and you're trying to catch it, whether it's Aikido, karate, it's a very difficult thing to do a bunch of techniques off an arm sticking out. But also Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, they're doing the same thing. There's people sitting there and people are spinning around and doing a million different things. And it just looks like a guy with his arm out because there's no countering. The person's just sitting there letting them do ridiculous things. So they're doing the same thing and they don't even realize it. So they all go through it. However, in saying that, if I grab you like judo and then I grab your wrist and I hold you and I move and then you go to escape, now I can put a wrist lock on you. As you're leaving me, I have your arm, as opposed to when we're closing. So I find that I do a lot of striking and judo, kumikata and so on. But once I have you, I then do a lot of Aiki, old Aiki Budo type stuff to you as you start to move away from me. So it works just fine. I've got a bunch of students that will testify that the Kotegashis were working on them just fine before, as we were doing Randori.
I enjoy your videos on social media, which also is a topic I would like to discuss with you. But before that, and I really don't want to, I mean, you can answer if you want. It's not, the point is not to confront opinions here, but I don't know if you know this. There's an American former Navy SEAL called Jocko Willick.
Jocko Willick. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner.
I think it's an interesting thing. Let's go and look at the United States combatives program. They call it the Modern Army Combatives Program. This was originally something. It came out as a study by the U.S. Rangers. Now, when they looked into it and they realized that they needed to have a force-on-force, a testing, if you like, of skill, and so on. The original thing they came up with was Sambo. They decided Sambo was the thing they needed to do. The reason they went down the line of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is that there wasn't enough Sambo instructors in America. They didn't feel like they could learn Sambo. So, you only have to read the doctrine and you can read this. I mean, I've literally read the history of this. So to sit there and say, oh, no, jiu-jitsu, it's like, oh, well, it was the second choice. But the thing is, there's so many people who are into jiu-jitsu, and I've got no issue with that. But jiu-jitsu today is like saying Krav Maga. It's like, it's people call jiu-jitsu something that is Sambo or is judo or is predominantly something. It's like if you grapple, you're doing jiu-jitsu. You could be doing catch wrestling. Oh, I'm doing jiu-jitsu. It's not even Gracie jiu-jitsu anymore. It's not even there are schools that will just go for taking the back straight away, past the guard to the back. Don't even work through the hierarchy of positions. There's people who will work just go for submission straight away because I know how to wrestle, I know how to do this and this. Why don't I just go for the submission? Well, this is what they do in judo, because they have limited time. So the rules of the sport change the sport. And the model for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to have as many people compete as possible. So in judo, if you're the champion, national champion, or depending on the level of competition, there's one champion. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there's hundreds. I think a friend of mine worked out it could even be, I think it was hundreds. So you have a white belt champion, blue belt champion, purple belt champion, brown belt champion, black belt champion. Then they have all the master levels based on your age. Then you have all the weight categories for each one. Then you have the females. But there is everyone gets to be a champion. There is a lot of champions that walk away from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament. So it's very clever. The marketing is superb. And everyone gets a participation trophy, but you get to have a wrestle while to get it. And there's people that don't even, and look, there'll be jiu-jitsu people, they know it's true what I'm saying, but no, we've got to do this and this. Well, that's fine, but be careful what you wish for. You want Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to be an Olympic sport. If that happens, there won't be any blue belt, purple belt, whatever champion. There'll be black belt like judo, and it'll be one champion for weight categories, and that'll be it. And that will change the sport because, like judo, other things won't be that important. No one will take importance. Happened to Taekwondo. Well, I did Taekwondo when no headgear was worn and you're trying to kick each other and knock each other out. Yeah. Joe Rogan did Taekwondo in these times. And now I couldn't do Taekwondo today because you've almost got to use your feet like your hands and touch and so forth and tap, tap, tap and make the thing beep. That's how you win now. It's almost tag with your feet. Now, but the problem is that everyone bases a martial art on its sport. So, Taekwondo, it's garbage. Well, it wasn't garbage. Its sporting context now is garbage. but they're trying to make it fit the Olympic model. I think the worst thing for martial arts is the Olympics. Don't go to the Olympics. I don't even understand why everyone wants to go to the Olympics. Worst thing you could do. Because you watch, you know.
Sorry. I guess this happened even to combat sports and even other sports, like you were saying. I mean, boxing, it used to be bare knuckle, and it was like almost for the circus in 2 centuries ago. And I'm sure if someone playing rugby right now plays against someone playing rugby before, where there was no protection at all, not protection by the rules, I mean, and probably they were doing nastier things in the 70s than now. Like you say, is advertising, is trying to bring kids to the sport or to the martial art. Then you need to modify this, and now boxing, the padding, of course, is totally different than when Muhammad Ali was fighting. It has changed a lot, and it will change even further.
Always changes. I mean, if you look at Kyokushin Kai changed their experience with fighting the ties, with the leg kicks, all these things, and you know, it was a strong, powerful thing. And the other thing too is, if it becomes popular, if a rule set becomes popular, why would you change it? It's like, well, this is taking over the world. It's becoming so popular. UFC is becoming popular, but now, you know, Kyokushin is lost its way because it doesn't allow grappling. Now, I'm not saying it's lost its way, but it's not as popular as it was once, you know, like in the 90s and so on. You know, right through from its beginnings through once it found its feet with knockdown. And Kaijo John Blooming was saying that before Sosai passed away, that he contacted him to look at adding the grappling. But then when I talked to Sensei Zuma Takashi, he always felt that Kyokushin had all these elements because of the magazines and because of the, you know, the different things that this is what Kyokushin is. But he never saw it. It's like, why are we not doing this? And always talk to Sosai about, we need to have this, this, this. And then one day Sosai, you know, was like, look, if you want to do it, go do it. And that was his trigger. Oh, good, I got permission. So he started Daidajuku. But it's, you know, but I think he would have adapted once if knockdown started to die away. I think Sensei Yama would have adapted and would have gone, you know what, I want Kyokushin to go down this path. Look at Kyokushin Goshin Jitsu. If you look at the doctrine and the old techniques, it looks like Aikido, looks like Aikido Jiu-Jitsu. Kotegashis, the whole everything. There's so much but it never became a thing because the tournament and competition took over, you know. So if that didn't happen, then other things would have, you know, come through. So, and I'm very aware of this. I'm very aware of this because we have a tournament now in the Army Combatives, but it's the rules are designed to meet objectives. It's not the same as fighting on the battlefield, but it's free play, that's safe. And the rule set is to teach soldiers balance and to fight for a certain objective. And they wear body armor with sort of rubber inserts that don't hurt each other. So it's something that creates a contest to allow for free play, okay? To understand, you know, controlled chaos, randori, okay? But in saying that, one martial art I did for a few years with a person called Hunter Armstrong, who was a student of Don Drager, and ended up with Yagu Shinkago Ryu. They train in also a form of spear, yarai, and with a slide, the metal, they have a metal handle and slides through, and I can't remember at the moment the name of this, but this has a form of randori. They literally fight with the spears, and you wear armor, and they hit you, and for the life of me, it's the only thing I've come close to that was like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu when I first started, and you wrestle someone like Jean-Jacques Machado or something, and you just felt like a putty in their hands. This was like that. I would try to hit with this spear, and all I got was struck in the head, struck in the body. I couldn't pass their spear. And I found that so intriguing. But they don't have international competitions or anything like that. It's just a form. And same as kendo, there's a group where they allow the takedowns, like the police kendo and so forth. And there's a style that allows grappling. But, you know, you don't see this in kendo competition. No, I think martial arts needs to do the opposite for people. So maybe if you're trying to attract people, you know, through social media, I'm trying to learn to be better at it and so on. So I understand that. But Budo should be about increasing attention span and should be about, like, there's people out there training right now who I just basically said, you will now do randori for 20 minutes. After that, you'll, you know, the weakest technique of somebody, help them with understanding how to do it better. And I leave them to it and they're doing it. And it's like I started a training group, almost like Sotodesh, you know, like the students who like Deshi but live out, you know, don't live in like Uchidesh. But it's like, if you don't want to follow how I train, then leave. So I only have an interest now in people who want to train old style. And that's it. So I do a lot of seminars and that, and I don't mind people being all different backgrounds and so on. But if you train with me as a personal student, then you're going to do it like this. And that's it. And I actually find I have a waiting list of people because we have a small training area, and we have a waiting list of people who want to train because I've limited the number because people want to experience that Budo feeling, you know. So, you know, we'll do jiu-jitsu, but we'll do it in a very Japanese way. Sounds ridiculous when you say a Japanese word in martial art and say that, but it's what we do. But we also link our throwing, our wrist locks. It's like a Sobudo, you know. So this is just my personal group, and all the instructors within Jisen Budo are from different backgrounds, and that's what makes it so interesting and enjoyable. It's a sort of all-round fighting. Very much like, you know, our IBK linkage, you know, from the Kyokushin all-round fighting. But yeah, I think it's the opposite. And I think if I was trying to make a living from martial arts, then I would have to do it this way. But I find myself and other people who are not making a living from martial arts, we don't need to compromise. And I refuse to compromise. I'm not interested. So I have some friends, and most of us do not make our living from martial arts. And we have a core group, and that's how we train. I think it will come back. I think it's something that people want to experience. However, I have friends too that have to make a living, but they keep the Budo structure. So even though there's different levels and different capabilities, and they allow for people who aren't as dedicated as others, they still maintain the culture. So that, you know, and I think this is a thing like Uchidesh, you know, I think this is what the dojo is meant to be. There's the general student and so on, there's junior students, but the Uchidesh or the Deshi are the standard, you know. What's the expectation? Well, this is the highest standard.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Army Combative Program, there are levels that are from recruit training to all core training to infantry, then to special forces. And based on your ECN, your employment category, your employment category number, you have to have a certain level of training. But what we've done is we've created the sporting element And what initially this was just any martial art, so we created the Australian Defence Force Martial Arts Association, and we have this now. So judo, karate, whatever, any martial art you can train and practice. But the idea was that you trained and developed your personal skills so that you could better complement a team that was using tactics and weapons. So the whole idea is, you imagine playing rugby. The best way to think of it is a rugby team. That's what the Army Combatives is in the Australian Army. It's a rugby team. And when they tackle, someone's going to go low and someone's going to go high. Very hard for you to stop that when two people are tackling you in sync. But also there's weapons, like there's multiple balls flying around and so on, or like American football, someone's going to come from the flank or something. So it's, okay. So there's all these things. But then the idea of the martial art training is that you're just spending time on, how do I pass the ball? How do I throw the ball? You're just practicing throwing the ball, or you're practicing kicking the ball, or you're practicing, catching the ball. It's personal skills that enhance your overall capability. And if people have no interest in that, then they just end up on the bottom of someone getting bashed. But as long as they hang on to that person and call assist and keep the person out of the battle, doesn't matter. So you can be absolutely garbage at fighting, but as long as you do your job, then that's no worries. It's fine. But if you want to be a person on top and you want to be good at this, then you're going to have to develop skill sets. So it's a very important thing. So what it does, it allows professional development in these skill sets, but it also has us achieve the objectives of short length courses. And in the past, unarmed combat courses used to be short length, but all they did was show you what you didn't know. You had no clue, and there was a chance for instructors to show you how great they are. Now, the opposite is that you actually need to be effective in a combat situation at the end of a week. How do you do that? You teach people rugby. You teach people how to fight in teams and how to use their weapons properly. And then you have stages of training. Now, how the program works with the KFIC, military jiu-jitsu, whatever you want to call it, how you want to look at it, is when I did this in my unit at 2 Commando, it was very easy. I was running all the courses and I was running the training, the continuation training. So making the link and people understanding, I wanted people to do a sport, combat sport, without worrying about tactics. Don't worry about the tactics, just develop your skills. Then apply those skills as appropriate to the tactics when it's time. Now, when the whole army started doing this, there was a massive division. Everyone lost the reasoning behind it. So they didn't understand they were meant to complement each other. So in the end, what happened was there was a great drive by people who did my training to create our own form of combat sport, our own rank structure, similar to the Marine Corps belt system and so on, so that the training in their free time was directly linked to the skill sets we wanted people to have. So, we want people to have side control, yoko shirikatami, not mount, because there's two people fighting. Because there's two people fighting, we want to have one person have the high real estate area and another person to come in and take the hips and low real estate. So high cross, low cross, this is what we call it. Because it's sort of the tactical outcomes and objectives are different to individual fighting, we want people to fight as individuals in that way. So we make our competition about those positions. And they're the only positions that you'll get an instant victory if you hold those positions. If you don't, you need 2 submissions, not 1 to win, things like that. So we still reward behaviors that will damage people, but the behaviors where I can damage you and stay on top and then access a knife or a weapon, get a higher reward. So again, we're using rules to enhance skills that better suit the task. So that's the difference. Look, I like what you're doing for Budo, and I like the sentiment behind it, but it really is it really is well done. So anything that I can do, and it's made me. It's interesting because people that you've had on from around the world that you've had on that group, quite a few of them I started following. Like, it made me interested in their martial art and what they do. And, you know, I just start following them and seeing what it is that they're involved in. So, yeah, it's a good thing.
That's the whole purpose, to connect people. Okay, Sensei, I have my last question, and this one can be a very short answer or maybe one more hour.
Okay.
What's the, if you need to choose one thing, what will be the most valuable thing that you have had or you obtained from your training so far, from martial arts?
Most valuable thing. Well, look, I will credit my martial arts with saving my life and saving the life of my team members. However, I think sharing a mindset with other people, like-minded people, is the most important thing. Like, I think for me, the friendships and belonging to a culture, a subculture. I mean, why democracies or freedom of choice is important to me is because I don't like any governments. So I would rather have no government, but I understand that, you know, there has to be a government. So the governments that let me just leave me alone and let me live how I want to live, which is this Budo life, and that's what I'm for. So I'm all for, you choose the life you want to live. But Budo, I think, teaches, the thing is, it teaches you that in life there are consequences, and also there's mortality. You know, it's like we're in the white gi. You know, it's a reminder of that. In the end, that death is coming. If it's not today, maybe tomorrow. So yes, you have to live with purpose, but you also need to accept that your purpose may end at any time. So how does your purpose carry on past your death? Well, Budo and being with others that are like-minded, you're part of that path. You know, when you die, you're strengthening the path of Budo. If you live that Budo life, your example is going to be example for others. So you live on rather than just, you know, even if you're not remembered, you may be, your contribution to Budo may be remembered in some way. So you're doing something for the future, you know, and if people didn't do this in the past, we wouldn't have the Budo that we have today.
Thank you very much, Sensei. It's 1 hour and a half, so we are good.
Oh, it's good. You're on the money. Yeah.
It was a pleasure, Sensei, and I hope I can see you in person soon.
Of course, and good to meet you again.
Thank you, Sensei. Take care. Thank you very much.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.